The next wave of Penn State prospects are heading to campus this weekend. More five-star players checking out Happy Valley and Penn State football. Can the team net one of these guys? We're not going to get to the answer today, but we're going to tell you about the players that are visiting and what Ryan Snyder thinks of Penn State's relationship with those individual prospects and you know what the chances are. Give you handicapping the situation, you might even say. But it's just Ryan today. Me and Ryan here on the BWI Live Recruiting Show. So, Ryan, welcome. Thanks for holding things down for us today during a very busy time of year for you.
Yeah, Fitz is off to enjoy the U.S. Open. I'm jealous. I hope those boys have a good time out there today. I will hold down the fort for us. It's kind of big-time recruiting season, right? So, understandable. No big deal. I'm just more so jealous or anything that I'm not at Oakmont today, but no problem at all. And man, it's busy right now, so there's plenty to talk about.
I feel safe saying this with you here. I would not be brave enough to say this with Fitz or with Nate on the show. I just don't care about golf. I just don't care. Like, I know, am I in the minority here that just does not give a crap about golf? Okay, cool. That makes sense. Yeah. Given the ecosystem we're in of sports dudes, I'm probably in the minority of people that don't really care about golf. But for those that celebrate, happy U.S. Open weekend or week, I guess, right? That it starts today. Thursday's the opening round.
Yeah. They're going out today. Truthfully, I didn't even tell you this. I played 9 holes this morning, so yeah, I love golf. It's fun. I'm just now getting into it. I suck, but we had a
because it's summer and your kids don't have to go anywhere. So
yeah. Well, my wife came home early. My wife came home early. Thankfully, she was away all week and. She came home last night. Was supposed to come home today, and I did 3-4 days with the kids, right? So I needed a decompression, so got out there.
Hold on, it's 10 o'clock. Did you do you live on a golf course? How did you do?
I only played 9 holes. Only 9 holes, dude, and I was terrible today. So
okay,
yeah,
9 holes would take me 6 hours. So 9 holes would take me 6 hours. I have golfed before. Part of probably why I don't like golf is because I'm very bad at it. That's just amazing. I mean, I was here slaving away, making graphics for the show, but good for you.
Good job. I woke up at 4 o'clock and got my shit done. So anyway,
let's just try to one up each other for the rest of the show. Let's do that. Okay, so we need to get to the actual stuff on the show today. Thank you for sitting with us as we catch up here on the show. This is also one of the few times I get to hang out with Ryan and Fitz and Nate. So there is some genuine just hey, what's going on in your life? How you doing to start the show? Little slice of what we do here. So coming up tomorrow, Penn State has another camp. Now it's Father's Day weekend, correct, Ryan? So we're not going Friday, Sunday. What's going on this week as far as, before we get into the meat of the discussion with the official visits and the decisions that are going to be made, it's the next round looking forward to 27, 28, 29, etc. in the recruiting classes for Penn State on Friday. So what's going on?
Correct. Yeah, just a 7-on-7 this week. Penn State usually has a prospect camp on most Sundays. That'll resume next Sunday. Looking like the whiteout camp actually will be next Sunday, which we'll get into. There's been some calendar changes. Usually the whiteout's been in July. But long story short, of course, they had prospect camps the last 2 Sundays. They take off for Father's Day. And but this week 7-on-7 looks to be pretty good. Last week it was only, what was last week, T. Frank? About 20 teams, something like that.
I think about 18 to 20. Yeah.
Yeah, it won't be quite double that, but it'll be I believe in the 30s. A handful of prominent programs throughout the region. We know Harrisburg's coming back up. Messiah Mickens is going to be there with his team. I assume Kevin Brown will be camping again. He's been up here for the last couple weeks. Amani Christian should be up as well. David Davis, of course, is one of Penn State's commits there. Coatesville will be up as well. Maxwell Hiller, of course, 2027 prominent offensive lineman. He's not working out tomorrow, and Terry Wiggins has his official visit this weekend. So the way official visits work, I don't believe he'll be able to camp tomorrow. There's some NCAA rules that don't allow that. Now, if he, I got to double check on that. I guess if he technically drives himself up here and then starts it after, he could. But either way, Wiggins was up there last week.
I don't think. Yeah, he's not going to be participating. At least from what I saw last week, where he had some sort of soft brace on his hand. So I don't think he's going to be participating this weekend.
Right. So I'm going to work on a more full preview for that a little later today. But compared to at least the first 7-on-7, this will certainly be one of the deeper ones. I believe Malvern Prep is another prominent school, although Jackson Ford should be taking official visits elsewhere, so I doubt we'll see him. But there's some young guys to keep an eye on.
And they've got some young guys on that roster on the defensive side of the ball too, defensive end, I believe, who's very talented that can make that camp.
So, we'll have a full preview of that. But just one camp this weekend. They have a midweek camp next Wednesday. That's kind of to make up for the camp that they're skipping this Sunday. We're too far out from that to really know who's all going to be. There's a couple of prominent guys who are looking into it, and we'll get into that, a little bit of a preview next week with that camp. So, looks like a Wednesday camp for next week. A Wednesday camp. Friday will be the last 7-on-7, and it looks like a whiteout next Sunday. So they're certainly going to end with a bang next week, but just one camp this week.
All right. That's what's on tap for tomorrow. So slather on your sunscreen. We'll be out there following along on the 7-on-7 tournaments, which are, for me, just entirely overwhelming with so many players on campus. It's supposed to thunderstorm tomorrow. Like I'm 0 for 2 in terms of going to camps and there not being some sort of rain delay.
I believe it is, but I think it's a little later in the day, so we'll be okay. But
that's wild.
Who knows?
You had a chance to talk to a lot of people this past week. A lot of them prospects we're going to get to here in just 1 second. But if you want this information on the regular, you want to get all this information as he's posting it, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com is the place to go and check it out. You can subscribe right now for just $1 for the first week of access, and then you can decide if all of that hard work that Ryan puts in, all the blood, sweat, and tears, all the 4 a.m. getting up and working on his things before his kids get up. I'm really trying to pull on the guilt strings. I learned from a master growing up. If you want to reward Ryan for all that hard work, join us at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. You can read his work. You can talk to him on the message board. We have our recruiting threads, which are some of the most popular things we do on the site. They're all there for you to get this information in a really, really condensed way. Here we have a conversation about it. And my favorite thing to do is have a conversation about the conversation. So we've talked about Amauri Polydor committing to Penn State. He's given you the journey of Amauri Polydor from prospect at a different school to St. Francis Corner to Penn State commit. But you also had a chance to talk to Charles Power, who broke down his film and discussed what he sees as a prospect. So what were the big takeaways for you in what Penn State's getting from a player? And I'll just say on the front end, like, there was not as much video for me to find, and I'm sure Charles has much more access than I do. So I'm curious to know what he has to say about Amauri Polydor.
Ball skills and growth with athleticism. I think those were the two key takeaways. Let's start with the fact that Amauri Polydor was the Under Armour MVP at the Charlotte camp in 2024, and Penn State, he'd kind of been on the radar a little bit, had a decent year as a sophomore at National Christian Academy, but really kind of broke out as a junior at Mount Zion Prep last year. 9 interceptions was a very impressive number. That came after, of course, the MVP performance there. But the point with the MVP performance is that he had some really good testing numbers at that camp. And now, since moving to St. Francis, the UC report, which is kind of what runs Under Armour, there's UC report camps, there's Under Armour, they're all kind of together. They make stops at prominent schools. So, of course, Baltimore Under Armour camp was, 2 weeks ago or so. And when they're in the area, they actually stop at St. Francis and test all these guys out. And so we were able to get some updated stuff on him. I'm not going to go through all the numbers on YouTube. They are in the story if you guys want to check it out, just as far as, the growth that he's had. But just seeing steady growth, right, from an athletic perspective is impressive. And his numbers now look very good, especially when you compare him to Julian Peterson and some other guys. He's not quite the athletic freak that like Akari Adams is, but it really stacks up well for what Terry Smith is looking for in this room. So I think that was a big thing for Charles, and then obviously just those ball skills, right? I mean, 9 interceptions. He had, I believe it was 3 or 4 at NCAA. So you're talking about a player who's had 13 or so interceptions in 2 seasons like that. Those, you're not going to find those stats too many places. Now, with that said, he's taken a massive step up this year, moving to St. Francis. I think they play Chaminade this year. They play St. John Bosco, which is a powerhouse in California. They're going to play IMG Academy. They're going to play St. Joseph's Prep. So the amount of talent, the players he's going to go against this year, compared to what he was going against in Mount Zion, that's really what's going to be, or that's really what Charles is really kind of looking forward to seeing as far as, kind of Amauri Polydor emerge as a 4-star player. But, you got players at like like St. John Bosco, they have Matt Williams, a good looking prospect that Penn State was interested at one point. There's a few others as well. Chaminade always has, a bunch of really good receivers. I know Jason Lopez is a player that's probably going to end up at maybe Miami. We'll see where he ends up. But
and as you mentioned, that's a national schedule. So they're going to Florida. They're going to California for some of these prospect, to play some of the best teams in the country. Just quickly on this, 88 3-star. For those listening to the podcast that don't see here on the screen, we have his On3 recruiting profile, 88 3-star by On3. So Charles obviously wants to see that next level competition before he makes a determination. 88 3-star kind of feels like when you got a good prospect and you want to see more, it seems like that's kind of where he lands on those guys. Was that kind of the takeaway or the understanding you got from your conversation?
Sure. I mean, I think that's the fair. His athletic numbers were always very good. Had a very good camp performance, but when you're watching the tape, which is good, it's just hard to kind of compare him. Which he still has limited tape. Just to kind of throw that out there, just to kind of compare him to some of the elite cornerbacks throughout the region and really the country. So again, but he has his chance. This is his shot to really go out this year and show that he can stack up against some of the nation's best. I didn't mention like Osani Gales is, I believe, like the top. He's one of the top 3 or 4, wide receivers in the country for 2027. Like he plays at IMG, so that's going to be a matchup we can watch in the coming months. But he's going to get his chance to really stack up against some awesome wide receivers. Now we have the testing numbers, which are steadily improving. We've already seen glimpses of the ball skills, through his highlight tapes and things like that. And now he's going to play the schedule that if he can continue to do what he's done at Mount Zion. There's going to be a strong case to be made that he deserves a 4-star rating.
Yeah, and to just as you're seeing here on YouTube, the highlights are indicative of what you saw when there was some of that full game coverage. These aren't necessarily just high school quarterbacks throwing to center field and he goes and he runs it down. He's got great zone recognition. These are legitimate interceptions of him seeing the ball in the air and then going attacking it, high pointing it. I like the way he addresses the ball in the air. Seems to have that ability to see the flight path and anticipate when the ball is going to get there. So I always feel good when I see something and I write about it and then Charles says the same thing. And because Amauri Polydor was not the most forthcoming of film evaluations when it came to what's actually happening for him on the internet. And St. Francis is a different story. All of it's behind a paywall or on a national TV stage. So we'll see. Everyone will get a chance to see all of that stuff, but you might have to pay for it as well to see him in the fall. And of course, Ryan will be tracking all of that at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I want to talk to you quickly about our favorite person here on the BWI Recruiting Podcast, and that is Andy Ludicky. He is a franchise consultant and the owner of MyPerfect Franchise. You can check him out at myperfectfranchise.net or email him at andy@myperfectfranchise.net. So I'm giving you all the contact information. I told you who he is. I told you he's a great guy. What does he do? Well, first off, if you don't know what a franchise is, have you ever heard of I don't know even if I should say some of the names of mega corporations around the country that have locations in almost every single city in America. You can buy one of those individual businesses and then run it for yourself, whether it's a hair salon, a fast food restaurant, something a little bit less brick and mortar. Maybe for Andy, he talks about the fact that he owns a dumpster company where he can take dumpsters out to places and then they're filled and then and then he hauls them away. These things like that. Porta potty companies. He likes the trades. He's all about the trades and the reusability of those things. If any of that makes sense to you, if you have corporate experience or business experience and you're making a lot of money for somebody else in a business, in a corporation, but you want to make money for yourself and diversify your assets, build a legacy, or live the American dream, which means financial independence, this is a path that could help you get there. And Andy, his services are 100% free to you. He's here if you have any questions about business ownership. So if any of that makes sense to you, you know what I'm talking about. Andy at myperfectfranchise.net to get started today. Also, I know we always talk to Fitz about this, but Ryan, you also like beer. And I know that because we got in a beer together before. And so I want to tell you about Hoppy Valley Brewfest, which is coming up July 19th, 2025. It's going to be, last year it was at Beaver Stadium. And that's not quite going to work this year because I don't know if you know this or not, but there's a renovation going on at Beaver Stadium. But don't worry, you're going to be in the literal and proverbial shadow of it in the Porter North lot, which if you've ever been to State College, if you've ever been on campus, it's literally right across the street. And you're going to have access to Medler Field, which is an awesome baseball field. One of my favorite places to go get a drink outside in State College is Medler Field, and you're right next to it. Beautiful view. It's a parking lot party is what we're doing. You're tailgating in July, getting yourself warmed up for the football season. So again, July 19th, Porter North lot. It's attached to Medler Field, and there's going to be over 75 breweries from Pennsylvania and beyond. This is a Penn State event. So people that go to Penn State or are Penn State fans that then start breweries and go, you know what? I love Penn State. They're going to bring their awesome beer to State College. So exclusive pours and opportunities to meet brewers. They're going to have some of those small cask stuff during the VIP hour, which you can get tickets to right now. You should definitely do that because you want to make sure you get those exclusive. You're only going to get them in these situation type of beers. And who doesn't like the experience of that, right? Here's the other thing is like, I love feeling like a VIP. And if I have a VIP opportunity that also includes beer, that's super awesome. Designated driver tickets are also available. So if you want to come back to State College and you want to come and enjoy what I call the Garden of Eden in the summer, central Pennsylvania in the summer is just like, it's not too hot. It's not too cold. Sometimes it's kind of humid, but it's just perfect. The trees, everything, it's awesome. And you get to drink beer outside here. So reserve your spots right now, hoppyvalleybrewfest.com. Hoppy Valley Brewers Fest, Hoppy Valley Brewers with an S, fest.com. And you should definitely check it out. And when you go there, tell them we sent you from the BWI Live podcast. Our friends at Anti-Fragile, big part of this. We want to make sure that they are supported in this endeavor because this is something that worked out really well the first time. And it's going to be awesome this time. So go check it out. Okay. Got through our talk about Amauri Polydor and some of the future of Penn State football. Now we need to talk about what happened last weekend before we get into the big dish, which is what's coming up this weekend. But official visits last weekend are also massive with a 5-star and a potential 5-star. And I hate that whole journalist thing of having to tell the fact that Luke Wafel's not a 5-star when he's obviously one of the 5 best defensive ends in the nation, probably one of the top 15 best players in the country based on his talent and his size, etc. Anyway, you had a chance to talk to a lot of people from last weekend. So how those conversations go? What did you glean from talking to some of the players and the family members that you did last week?
One thing I will say just on that topic there is like it is like writing headlines and things like that of a like potential 5-star. It does get annoying at times, but I like the way On3 goes about it because you never want to call a player a 5-star and take that away. And in the early stages of my career, that happened a lot. So I like the way that they go about that of like, hey, we know these 6, 7, 8 guys absolutely deserve it on testing numbers and all these different things. Let's figure out the back half of that, those 23 to 40 so guys ranked, to figure that out later on. So it's something that I've seen the growth of how we do these rankings, dating back to when I was at Rivals and seeing how 24/7 did things, different things like that. So I do really actually respect the fact that that's how On3 goes about it, because I do think, with time and learning and things like that, it's the right way to do it, because you never want to call a kid a 5-star and take that away from them. That's you don't want to do that with 4 stars either, but it's understandable a little bit more when you're talking about a pool of 300 instead of a pool of 30. So just to clarify that, or just kind of my thoughts on that. But, let's talk about that potential 5-star, right? Luke Wafel, I think that's absolutely the place to start. This is obviously a recruitment that has been in the spotlight for a while now. It really started well before Owen got here, but when his brother Owen got here, it kind of took that up to a different level. So, of course, Owen's very involved last week, but it wasn't. I wouldn't say Owen was his host or anything like that. They made sure to.
They weren't hammering that angle, it seems.
Yeah. It's Luke's visit, and Owen's very involved, but he was actually hosted by Zariah Fisher, which I thought was a very interesting and calculated move. Just because of how well respected Zariah is, and things like that, how well spoken he is. A lot of Zariah actually makes a lot of sense to be the one that hosts Luke, because if you look at a lot of other guys, who came up last weekend over the past couple of weeks, a lot of them are hosted by players who are a little bit more their age, right? So I thought it was just interesting that Zariah, a 6-year senior, was he 5th year, 6 year, I believe, was the one who hosted Luke. So, but I think the big takeaway really is that I think this is a recruitment that's going to go to the very end. He left Ohio State, a lot of positive talk about the Buckeyes. I feel like it was kind of the exact same thing with Penn State. A lot of positive talk. He's going to go to, is it USC? I think this upcoming weekend, it's going to be the same thing. Really enjoys USC. I do wonder about the distance from home with that. I think USC obviously has a lot to offer. They're being very aggressive NIL wise and all those things. But, I see a similar outcome coming from this weekend there. And then, of course, he'll finish it up, that final weekend with, I think it's Texas is the final weekend. So I've always looked at Penn State, Ohio State, Texas. Like if he doesn't end up at one of those schools, I'd be pretty surprised. Florida and USC kind of came in a little later. He sees some things he likes at those schools, but Texas, Ohio State have been, the primary competitors for a long time.
Can I clarify? Does going to the end mean his late June, early July soft designation, or does it mean going all the way to December when he signed?
No.
How far does this go to the end?
I think all these guys want to get this over with.
Okay.
Especially like the thing about recruiting now, we've talked about this a little bit in recent podcasts, but January now is a contact period for this class. May is a full contact period for this class. So it used to be that, a lot of prospects really didn't get that one-on-one off-campus time. It was really just if you're on campus, you get that time, and then you get that time when you take your official visit. But you got to remember, Penn State did 2 visits with Luke Wafel in January. They did 2 visits with Luke Wafel in May. He's visited Penn State 3-4 times, or I would say at least twice in the past year. Maybe 3 since 2025 started. And that's just Penn State is my point, right? So Texas has done all those same things. Ohio State's done all those same things. When you add that all up, these guys are getting very, very worn out from the process. So really what I mean by that, then it's going to go down the end is this is a massive part of big time when you're going for those big Marlin kind of recruits now is the financial discussions that come at the very end. For the most part, Wafel and all these guys really have gone through unofficial visits with schools not really wanting to discuss finances because you never want to be the first to lay a marker down because you're just going to get leaped and you're setting a bar that maybe sometimes you don't want to set. That all comes now kind of that discussion, those talks are really starting to happen for official visits, and they're going to ramp up really hard in the final 4, 5, 6 days of his recruitment. So it's going to play a big part in it. Let's not beat around the bush. The financial part of this is big now. And that's why I really kind of feel like, I can sit here and say, I feel great about Penn State today. I can sit here and say the same about Ohio State, Texas, but in the end, it's going to be a lot of schools matching each other. And he sees a lot of positives in all of them.
Yeah.
In the end, it could end up just being a school that just wants to outbid everybody else too. And that's not me absolutely saying, this is what's important to Wafel family or not, but when you're a potential 5-star, just like it's going to be with Carter Meadows and some others, it gets that aggressive at the end. And I'm really trying to hammer that home because look, Penn State has 19 commits right now. They're going to finish with another 6, 7, 8. We'll see somewhere in that ballpark. They're going for the big fish now. This is why they've kind of been adding, those 3-star guys who they don't have to get in bidding wars with. Stack your class, get a good mold of those guys who are very athletic but need some time to develop. Because now you have those cash reserves that you're going to have to get aggressive with for those big fish at the end.
Yeah. So I feel like that does characterize as good news right there. That Penn State is in a position where they have, I think, been judicious and smart about some of these things, and they will be competitive in these situations where I think in previous years I guess from the outside, it felt like maybe they weren't prepared in certain recruiting situations to do that. And now it feels like maybe they learned some lessons from last year when NIL really, I felt like, roared to the forefront in June.
Yeah.
Would you say that's fair?
Yeah. With revenue sharing now, it's a whole different ballgame, right? Because of that it's 20-some million for all athletics. We know 15, 16. So we'll probably go to football. So they were able to kind of do the math on this long before we got to this point.
Okay.
And the one thing that it really interests me, and I can see how I don't want to scare fans, but I do want to stress that it costs a lot of money to keep Drew Allard, Nick Singleton, Denai Dennis Sutton, Katron, all these guys, Zane Durant. I can go on and on. It costs a lot of money to bring your roster back, where there's a lot of other teams now who are flipping now, right? Yeah. So they had their talent leave, Ohio State, some others. Now they have maybe a little bit more on the back end for these aggressive recruitments. So just keep that in mind. I think it's really important to stress. Maybe it will matter. Maybe it won't. I don't know what's in the pot, right? And I'm never going to really do that stuff. But I think it's really important to stress that, as we go down the stretch here and maybe some guys start going elsewhere, please remember where Penn State put this money however many months ago. And please remember, what's on the line for this season, because if you build off of that and you can get to the national championship or whatever it may be, well, that helps you a lot down the road too. So that's what's most important right now. I think they're going to land some of these guys, don't get me wrong. But I also just want to stress that, Penn State's always had the mindset of, retaining. And this year they really, really pushed the chips in on retaining. Where that difference is that 80-20? Is that 90-10? I don't know, but it could have an impact at the end. Keep that in mind.
Can I go on a small rant that I wanted to talk about on the Tuesday show? I'm calling these T. Franks tangents because it's something that sparks in my brain, and it's not on the rundown. It's not a thing that we plan on talking about, but I was talking, my wife has a coworker that was like, wait, the NFL has a salary cap? So I got to through my wife, explain the NFL salary cap this morning. This would be fun. I know that there's a certain percentage of fans that are out on paying players because they've been watching Penn State football for 30 years. This is not the way you do it. Joe would be rolling in his grave, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All the things. Okay, I understand. You don't like this. And I this is not for you. But for everybody that loves the NFL, the salary cap is a game. It is a full-on, how do we make the pieces fit within this other constraint? Because it's not fun to say, hey, I can just spend the most money. If I could just spend infinite money and get all the players, it would not be fun. And I think that, honestly, Oregon and Ohio State ruined this model because they can just dump cash and then win anything off the merits of that, plus whatever, plus their reputation. I don't want to take away that it's only
Texas A&M ruined the model 4 years ago, I would say.
Right. But those are the ones that have persisted, right? The ones that are not a flash in the pan. This is not fun for anybody because Penn State can have a guy in region. It makes a ton of sense. Maybe they've got a family member on the Penn State roster and the scheme fits them and all these things lining up. And then bang, you can just offer more in free agency with no real repercussions if you can go that level in the NIL. The subterfuge of it and the Ryan knows more than just about anybody, and Ryan doesn't know what's in the pot. We know that there's a number out there, $20.5 million for all athletics in college sports, in Power 4 sports. But we don't know, the NFL salary cap. What's the highest paid? What's the franchise tag? What's the minimum salary? What's the baseline for all these things? We don't know the average starting salary of X. And On3 does the best job we can of getting all that information and synthesizing it on the website. But damn, this would be so much more fun if we could play along, and we can't. And I just that's the rant I've been having in my brain of I want to know what's the strategy of, okay, you got Carter Meadows, you got Luke Wayfield, Tamari Simeon, Keyshawn Stansel. There are some really talented defensive linemen that came last weekend. You got more coming this weekend on the offensive line. What is the allocation that makes sense in the order it makes sense? That'd be a fun game to play, and I don't have any way to play it, and that stinks. So there's my rant.
You're going to need collective bargaining for that to even be a thing, I believe. So, maybe someday that'll come. But until that is a serious thing, it's not gonna happen. So, yeah, I don't know what to tell you other than that.
No, I know. And so collective bargaining, and of course there's a draft. So there is a streamlined there's a streamlined way that you acquire talent into the pool. So it's a shotgun and it's a free for all in college athletics. So there's no one-to-one correlation. But at some point, if there was some facsimile, I think it would enhance the sport, because we've seen it's obsessive. Fantasy football, you can do it where you don't just pick the best player. You can also build your team with a roster and all those things. And I love that. Oh my God, that is like a drug for me. So anyway, that's T. Frank's tangents for today. Who else do we have to talk about? Grayson McHugh. Let's talk about Grayson McHugh.
Yeah, there's plenty. I mean, Grayson's another very, very important recruit. Somebody I expect Penn State to be aggressive with down the end or down the stretch. I don't know how much money is really a thing there, though. To me, it's been academics and finding the best fit. I mean, this is kind of a throwback recruitment in some ways where, it's not like a John Urschel recruitment or anything like that, but academics have been at the forefront for McHugh for a long time. And that's actually how Texas got into it, because they have a really good engineering school. And he kind of didn't realize that, they were public Ivy and things like that. And as he progressed and learned more about Texas, he was like, hey, maybe it isn't a bad idea to throw them in the mix. And that's kind of how Texas got, that late official visit. But I still would be surprised if it's not Notre Dame or Penn State. Of course, he's going to Notre Dame this weekend, and that is a massively important visit for a lot of different ways. Maybe we can get into that on the back end of the show. But for Penn State's visit, I thought it was great that they hosted. They put him with Cooper Cousins and Drew Shelton, which is interesting to me. Drew is kind of the wise old soul, right? He's been here 4+ years now. He's from the same area as Grayson, where then you have Cooper, who was a stud recruit, getting his feet wet. He's certainly going to have a prominent role this upcoming year. And I thought that was a great combination, just talking to Grayson about what he was able to learn from those two. The academic part was massive. He spent a lot of time. I said engineering, or business is his thing.
Okay.
I meant that. I get lost sometimes with who's engineering, who's business, who's this, who's that. But yeah, business.
Not a lot of broadcast majors in there, Ryan, for it to really
click
and
no. There's some actually, but not if academics are usually the most important thing. But anyway, so look, it's a very important recruitment. I think Penn State has a real good shot. I'm very curious to see how this Notre Dame visit goes. Grayson doesn't really have a timeline to absolutely get this over with. Don't get me wrong, it will be early. He's talking about July 1. I wouldn't be shocked if it's before that. Is kind of actually maybe what I'm trying to stress. I wouldn't even be totally shocked if he didn't take the Texas visit. I think he will. I'd still lean that way. But my point is, this should be a weekend that really kind of defines, okay, is it going to be Notre Dame? Is it going to be Penn State? And we'll see where things go. But
it's really been those two the whole time. Yeah, two very similar programs that provide.
It would take a lot. It would take a lot for Texas to jump one of those two. I wholeheartedly do believe that. But at the same time, I wouldn't be shocked if he takes the visit. He is talking, like I said, about July 1 date. We'll see if that's actually how it all plays out. But yeah, he might be in some way. Emmanuel Iheanacho is coming this weekend. We'll talk about him a bit, but I would argue that McHugh actually may be a little bit more important. I just think he's more realistic and has been I never remember we were doing talks about McHugh like months ago. We're like, we know we should be talking about him because people don't really want us to be talking about him. And then he blew up, and it's like, well, now we got to talk about him. And my point with that is that's how important he was to Troutwine and some of these guys, where he was floating under the radar, and they were like, oh God, please, just don't blow up, kid, because we think we found a real gem here. Then, of course, he gets a 4-star rating. He stacks about 15 more offers in, 6 weeks or so. Yeah. And here we are. So a lot like it's similar to Kari Adams, although Kari Adams was already prominent, and then he became a potential 5-star, if that makes sense. Yeah. So
Grayson McHugh fits what we've been talking about. He is the most Phil Troutwine tackle that's left on the board, of hyper athletic, room to grow. He's very raw. He is still learning the position. So everywhere there's room to grow. And I think that, 5-star or not, he's my top tackle I've watched play on film, either, from full game or from the highlights. He's got it all. He's got all the things they're looking for.
Yep. So we'll see. We'll see where that one progresses. But at Notre Dame this weekend, if you're on the site on Sunday looking for feedback on, the Penn State's visitors this weekend, I would also load up the Notre Dame site and be looking for feedback on Grayson, because that's how important I look at that weekend or this visit this weekend. Excuse me. Oh, can't talk. All right. Jackson Ford, Carter Meadows. I want to roll through a couple other guys real quick.
Yep.
I think Jackson Ford knows what he has in Penn State. I think he also enjoys the process. So he's going to take all his visits out. I feel like Penn State should get Jackson Ford or Tyson Harley. I think we may have talked about this on the last show. I kind of look at Luke Wayful and Carter Meadows together. You get one of them, you're happy. You kind of have Tyson Harley and Jackson Ford. It's kind of get one of those two, you should be very happy. And then, we'll see where the cards fall as far as maybe they can get both, or, another defensive end emerges. But I think Jackson Ford knows what he has in Penn State. Ohio State is interesting to watch, as is Michigan. Kind of feels similar to some other recruitments, actually Carter Meadows, if I'm being honest, where I do feel like the Big Ten schools have an advantage with these guys. It's just with Carter Meadows, at least, it's maybe how aggressive South Carolina wants to get at the end there. But I feel good about Jackson Ford. That should be a recruitment at Penn State. Absolutely, I would say top 2. There might be a school that emerges that he thinks about and really compares Penn State to. But at the end of the day, with prominent recruits, if you're one of those top 2 that recruit is always comparing your school to whatever school, like that falls in your favor more often than not, and that's what you want. And it might be the same with Tyson Harley too, although Tyson's just a lot quieter. Carter Meadows is also very quiet, but where I'm going with Carter is I kind of lean Michigan. I felt for a while that Michigan kind of has an edge there, just the way Dad has talked to me in the past, just the way that contacts in Michigan have spoken on it. Like they seem to be very much all in on Carter Meadows, and I think
what is it about Gonzaga and Michigan that seemed to work this way? Because Ed Link, another guy that was a strong fit, made a lot of sense. Kanoa Winston
last year, there's a good connection there going on right now. So let's see where those cards fall. The one thing I'll also just say though is like South Carolina gets hyper aggressive with some of these Mid-Atlantic guys. We saw it with Evan Stewart. We saw it, and there's one other one I was thinking about the other day. I'm talking more so like potential 5-star guys. Nick Harbor.
Nick Harbor.
I mean, like, and it's out of those Washington DC guys to even be a little more specific. So I just don't want to sleep on that. There's clearly a good relationship there. South Carolina in that DC area. Something honestly, I don't cover South Carolina, but there's something there that does keep winning. Obviously, I'm sure they're aggressive financially as well with those guys. So I just don't want to totally sleep on the Gamecocks there. But if I'm making a pick today for Carter Meadows, I would lean towards Michigan. If I'm making a pick for Jackson Ford, I feel pretty good about Penn State. Don't want to 100% say it's absolutely PSU because I know he enjoys the process and has some more visits to go. So we'll see where things fall. Just real quick, Frank, I just want to handle like one or two more guys that we didn't put in our rundown from this past weekend. Travis Johnson, interesting one there. I still feel Michigan probably is the school there, but I think Penn State's in a little bit more than I thought after kind of digging on that one. And I was wondering how he would look at 3 wide receiver commits and things like that. I think his mom is very, very interested in Penn State. So I wouldn't sleep on Penn State potentially getting a 4th wide receiver. I do believe their chips are in on Travis Johnson. If they don't, they'll be happy with their 3, and that's where we'll go. But just keep an eye on him. I feel a little bit better about Penn State's chances after this weekend. Elijah Littlejohn, too. If Penn State's going to take a linebacker, I think they can get Elijah Littlejohn. Elijah's kind of got under the radar a little bit. He took a visit in April, got an offer right then, and has kind of just been very quiet, to be honest with you. But the feedback there is that Penn State has the opportunity to take him. It's more so, are they waiting to kind of see where other chips fall before adding a 3rd linebacker, which isn't absolutely needed, but it's not something that they would push away or, have already said, we're definitely.
And that's class wide, not just with Kosi Opala and some of the other guys.
Exactly. And that's a good way to say, I mean, we're at 19 commits now. So whenever I'm talking about the chips falling everywhere, we're at that point of the year now where, adding another O-lineman or 2 could potentially impact other positions. And same with, we know they need D linemen. They certainly want to add another D tackle. They have currently no defensive ends after Daniel Jennings reclassified. So, we know that position pretty well, but it's those other, adding a wide receiver. How does that impact adding a linebacker? If they add Joey O'Brien, that would be a 4th safety. That could potentially, impact a guy like Brian Bonner, and another running back who's coming in this weekend. So, aside from those, definitely defensive line, you're at the point now where adding at all these little spots impacts other positions.
Kyle K here says, going to be a sad day if O'Brien goes to Notre Dame. I just want to share a little behind the scenes, a little bit behind the curtain here. I feel like Penn State and Notre Dame are very similar programs, Ryan. I feel like they're fairly similar fan bases. Yeah. And this offseason, I always say, which one is it? Who is the main competitor? A couple of years ago it was South Carolina, maybe sometimes it's Clemson. Notre Dame, Joey O'Brien, Grayson McHugh, some of these top players on the board. Penn State, Notre Dame. So, being a part of the fight, Penn State fans, showing your support for your program. In the last 30 days, Blue and Gold Illustrated over our brother or sister station on YouTube. In the last 30 days, we've had 252,000 views on this channel. 171 for them. So Penn State fans, you're showing up. You're showing your support for your Nittany Lions. Now, on the other side, the size of their channel is roughly double. So tell your friends about Blue White Illustrated so you can show that Penn State fans are better, bigger, and cooler than Notre Dame fans. We're going to keep a running tally on that. So if you want to subscribe here to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, if only to spite Notre Dame, I think that's a great value add for you in your existence here when it comes to Penn State football recruiting and also just rivalries in college football. Texas a part of this one. I don't want to get into Texas because they have just like, oh my God, it's like a TV station.
Texas sites are insane.
Yeah.
Hey, I mean, I'll hit on Joey real quick. It's it's probably not what you guys want to hear, but like every year, it's not a bad thing for Penn State. It's me saying, I'm just done overthinking this recruitment. Like he's clearly loves all four of his options, and it's going to go to the end. It's kind of like Luke Wayfield a little bit for me, but I feel like every year we get to this point where everybody wants to kind of overthink things, and I think it's really kind of simple to like just let the visits play out. I had a really good talk with Luke Wayfield's dad about this the other day, and this is kind of going on a tangent a little bit because it has nothing to do with Joey O'Brien, but like all these parents, they see everything, and you see I think he's leaning this way, I think he's leaning that way. And I think it's amusing to a lot of these parents sometimes because they're like, we genuinely don't even know. Like, this is why we're taking these visits, right? Because we know, as we get to late June and July, like we do have to make this decision. And sure, Notre Dame was rumored to be the school for a long time. I think Oregon's come on strong. We'll see where things go. But I mean, I think Penn State's in it too. I just like let's stop overthinking it, and let's just try to be patient as much as we can. I left out Clemson too. Like Clemson is absolutely in the mix. I think all four of those schools, nothing would really surprise me at the moment with Joey O'Brien. So that I just think it's important to stress because we get to this time of the year, everybody wants answers. But we there has to be some patience. Like we'll know. We'll know when they start figuring things out. Like that's what we're paid to do, and that's what I'll work very hard on. But right now, we're still, I think, 2 weeks away from that stuff. Let me clarify. Joey O'Brien does commit in 1 week from now. We'll see if he sticks with that commitment date or not. I think he will. He wants to get it over with. But to me, it's just there's a lot of guys here where we're just kind of overthinking things. Like we got to let this play out a little bit.
Okay. Any other guys that you spoke to you want to talk about before we get into this weekend in the
no, for the most part, pretty good. I mean, Harley is a guy is very intriguing to me. I think Penn State has a good shot with him, but he's also really quiet. Amauri Simeon doesn't really talk, so it's hard to get a lot of info in there. Same with Keyshawn Stansel. I mean, we could go through the list. I did talk to JB Shabazz a little bit. Just came off an NC State visit. I do feel like Penn State actually made a very good impression on him and his family. But he would be the other
guy. He'd be the other tackle that I think has a similar level of talent that I would be interested in.
Yeah. But I also just believe that he really wants to go to Ohio State first, and the Buckeyes have been on him longer than Penn State, so I would kind of lean that direction a little bit. But Penn State certainly made a very good impression. And don't sleep on Garrett Witherington too. I know we've been talking about Keyshawn Stansel and Amauri Simeon, but I do feel like if Garrett Witherington wanted to get this over with, they would take him. They like him a lot.
Gotcha. Well, let's add to that list. Let's talk about some more guys that might be a part of that conversation, maybe be jockeying for position with Garrett Witherington. And that is our official visit weekend to round out the show here on the BWI Live show for this particular Friday and Saturday. Let's start with a rising recruit coming into this weekend. A very quick turnaround from performance to offer to official visit with Charlie Tom. I felt a lot better this morning doing a little more investigation on him. Tell us how all of this is unfolded with Penn State offensive line coach Phil Troutwine.
Yeah, so really it goes back to mid-May. As now that there's a college showcase, now that there's a college contact period instead of evaluation period, these showcase events have really emerged. Susquehanna does them in the local area. There's a ton of them. Malvern does the state prep. A lot of schools out in Pittsburgh, for example, there's 15 schools that do it all in 2 days. And that's kind of how they do it up in Massachusetts, Connecticut as well. Where I'm getting at is around, I think it was May 13th-ish, Avon, Tabor, all those big schools up outside of Boston, they had a showcase event. A ton of schools come into it because you can have contact with these guys now. And it makes these workouts a lot more not interesting, but beneficial, I guess is the best way to put it. Charlie Tom was a previously a tight end at Darien High School out in Connecticut, more so a blocking tight end, always had the size and all that. And he's going to do a prep here at Avon. And so when he makes a decision to go to Avon, the discussions quickly kind of turn to hey, look, if you're looking for college offers and take your next step, offensive tackle is what you need to pursue. And since making that move, he is really focused on that. And the athleticism, which was already kind of there, has now become very public, I guess is the best way to put it. He had a really good workout for that May 13th showcase. That's what sparked Troutwine then a day or two later saying, hey, you need to come down here and camp with me, pick your date, which was to end up being last Friday. Came down to camp, really good. T. Frank, we watched as much as we could until it was a heavy downpour, which kind of messed up the day a little bit. But
I feel a little bit better. I just want to jump into the story timeline here of I was over there watching them, and I just couldn't stop watching Kevin Brown and Roseby Labintus. He was in the top group with those guys working with Phil Troutwine, and I didn't know who he was at the time, and he was just like clearly new to the position, and the size is there, and the talent was obvious in terms of the size. But at this point, a guy who's a 2026, I just assumed, okay, this is a guy who's fighting for attention from maybe some of the other schools, because he was not on the same level as some of these other guys. Now that I see he played tight end last year, I feel a little bit better about, I'll just say it the way, ignoring him during that camp process. I was a little embarrassed by that, of like, he gets an offer, now he's in an OV, and I was standing right there. It didn't get a whole lot of Charlie Tom. Guy who just started playing tackle makes a little more sense. But anyway, that is kind of the context and the nuance of this is a guy who's so fast rising that he's taking an official visit this weekend. So please continue where I interrupted you there.
Yeah, sorry. I was trying to find his coach, John Hooley, who's absolutely phenomenal. One of my favorite coaches to really get to know, and as far as informative and things like that. He posted some updated numbers on Tom the other day. If you want to look those up real quick, T. Frank, maybe look up Tom's Twitter feed. I was trying to find him. But long story short, in my opinion, this is going to come down to, does Notre Dame offer him or not? I believe his mom is a Notre Dame alum. He went out there and camped on Monday. And this is also why Grayson McHugh is such an interesting visit here, because in my opinion, or at least from what info I've kind of gathered, I feel like Notre Dame has a lot of interest in him, but they also have 4 line commits. They're not going to take as many as Penn State this year. Are they waiting out Grayson McHugh to make a decision on Charlie Tom, which could potentially be the case? I'm not 100% sure of that, but it adds up at this time of the year with so many commits. I mean, Notre Dame's right up there with Penn State, where I think they're 18, 19, 20, somewhere in that ballpark. So another very interesting visit. He's going to come down here this weekend. On paper, you're right. Yeah, this guy should absolutely be on commit watch. I'm just not quite ready to push those chips in yet, because I do believe, if he gets that Notre Dame offer, that's where Charlie Tom's going. So let's see how it all plays out, because Grayson McHugh's at Notre Dame this weekend. Charlie Tom will be here. I think Penn State would, I have no doubt Penn State would take Grayson McHugh over Charlie Tom if they had to pick. Now, actually, I also believe that they would take both still. Because,
I was just going to ask.
Yeah,
I think
Troutwine would definitely take both. Yeah, he would. But I feel like Tom's going to probably wait a little bit to get a definitive answer from Notre Dame before potentially jumping on board.
What was I looking for on Twitter, by the way?
Don't even worry about it. It's his testing numbers that his coach shared. They're all good. I mean, he's okay. So here's what I'd say. He's very similar to Brady O'Hara. Remember that? And I think Penn State fans saw Brady O'Hara working out as a tight end. They were like, this guy's not a great athlete. Brady O'Hara as a tackle is a very good athlete.
Yes, I found them.
What I'm trying to stress there. I forget, his broad was like 9 something, had a 540, talk about a guy who's 6'6". And so there's a lot to like there from a testing perspective. And I understand why Troutwine had him on campus and then immediately offered, because Trout's looking for great athletes. And, he's a legit, 6'6", 280-ish?
I think on here, the tweet you were referencing, 6'6", 275 with a 9'3" broad jump.
Yeah. Those are good numbers, man. At a guy that size. Dude, there's some running backs who are going to maybe not Penn State kind of caliber schools, but some lesser Big Ten schools that don't have a broad jump that good. And to be that explosive at that size, that's when Troutwine's eyes lit up.
Yeah. So who are some of the other guys that we know? You want to just go into Emmanuel Iheanacho now? Just go on the line with the offensive line.
Yeah, it comes down to what's more important for Emmanuel Iheanacho. Is it academics? Is it money? He's going to have stupid money thrown at him. He's been the number 1 tackle, or number 2, whoever you want to look at it. But he's a top 5 recruit in the country, pretty much. Certainly by On3. I think the industry ratings have 3rd or something like that. But we know just from last year, the kind of money that was getting thrown. Talking about $1 million for a recruit.
Yeah,
I don't think Penn State's willing to do that. I feel pretty confident in saying that. So it's going to come down to, are academics more important, or is this kind of the money that you can't pass up? When I see LSU, Auburn, Oregon as his 3 other official visits, and then I see Penn State, those one of those things are not like the others. So that's where I get a little bit. That's how I've felt for a while now, that this isn't probably going to fall in Penn State's favor. But he goes to Georgetown Prep. It's an incredibly highly thought of academic school. So in the end, that's what I think that's going to really come down to. And Penn State's going to do everything they can to show him why he should lean that direction more and build his worth, build his, what he gets from the program, by years of proving himself and how Penn State does things. So time will tell, but this is Penn State's shot to do that.
He's an interesting guy because the length and the size is obvious.
He's 380 now, dude.
He's a right tackle. I would be concerned. I think there's some reshaping. If he's 380, there's some reshaping that they need to do. But at the same time,
350 last year, he was putting up insane numbers, man.
Yeah.
So I don't know what he's doing athletically. I haven't, I've written him off a little bit. So I don't know where he's at from that perspective, but
it would be interesting seeing a class with 350-pound Roseby Lubentis and then 380-pound Emmanuel Iheanacho. That's a lot of size. I have concerns with guys that are that big. I think personally that sometimes, once you get like 6'8", I start to get a little nervous. Once you get past 340, I start to get a little nervous about a guy's completeness in his profile.
So, I mean, it's the guy, he had a 8 foot 6 inch broad at 350 pounds. That's really good. It's really good. So, where he's at right now at 380, I'm not exactly sure. Trot One usually doesn't really prefer guys to get that big either. So that'll be interesting discussions. I haven't followed his progression over the last 6 months just because, first off, that offensive line board is massive. There's enough guys to follow, and they're starting to wither down. Don't get me wrong, but this was just one where it's like, when I look at the schools, when I know the money that's there or it's going to probably be there, it never really made sense to me. But here they are. Here's Penn State at the end, top 4. I mean, we thought at one point he was going to commit to Maryland, which would be another indicator that money is more important than what maybe people think at the moment. But time will tell. I don't want to overthink this one too much. We'll see.
Yeah, Drew Evers. Let's go to Drew Evers. This one is another one of those.
Ohio State. Move on.
All right. Well,
okay. I mean, so good. Listen. Here's
that's how I felt about it too. Like I was like, all right, we're gonna put him on the list because
here's what I'll say. His brother is Nick Evers. If you remember back to 2022, this actually would have been 2021 when it happened because this was when COVID was going on. His brother was going to commit to Penn State the day after Drew Aller committed. He was a quarterback. He ended up committing to, I think, Florida at the time, ended up at Oklahoma, ended up at UConn, somewhere in that ballpark. So Nick Evers never really reached his potential but he was a coveted 4-star quarterback at the time. My point with all that is that his family really liked Penn State. Now, because it was COVID, they never visited Penn State, and they did not visit this spring either. So this will be their first time actually coming to Penn State. Wow. But Nick Evers was this close to committing to Penn State. I mean, literally, Drew Aller, if Drew Aller waits another day or two, don't get me wrong, Penn State was taking Drew Aller. Let me clarify that. But, Evers was not far off that board, and he was right there close to committing. So, there's another player that Trout went and visited multiple times, at least 3 times between January and May. It may have been 4 times. He's someone that he really likes. But just when I look at the unofficial visits, when I know how hard Ohio State's recruiting him, it's really hard for me to see one visit to Penn State being the difference with Drew Evers.
Yeah. Another guy at 6'4.5" could play tackle. I think if Penn State got all the players they would want, he would have guard versatility. And I think that's kind of the indicator of this particular class is there's a lot of guys that have that. So it's just an interesting nugget in the profile of a guy who's visiting. That's kind of a national prospect as well.
Yeah. There was a point where I would say back in February, March, I remember having a conversation with a source and the person was like, hey, if there's one out of region offensive lineman that makes the most sense for Penn State right now, they pointed to him. But that was before he did not visit in the spring. And let me clarify, they did go to Ohio State in the spring. So when you come from Dallas, Texas, and you go to Columbus, and
you don't make the trip.
You're really close. I mean, as close as you're going to get to State College. It's still a 5-hour or so drive. Maybe it was a little less than that, maybe. But my point is to not make that kind of says something.
Yeah. Let's talk about Carter Gooden. I think this is an interesting one. Tell us a little more about Carter Gooden.
Yeah, player that Penn State liked as a defensive tackle for a long time, and Carter didn't want to hear that for the most part, from what I understand. And so he was supposed to visit last weekend. That visit was set weeks ago, maybe a month ago. And, Penn State really kind of hammered home, D-tackle. he wants to be edge. It's kind of like some Xavier Gilliam talk to this one. I remember with Xavier. Now, Carter has a little more options than Xavier had at the time, too. But
he's a little taller, too, a little bigger frame.
Yeah. I mean, that visit gets canceled, and Penn State realizes, okay, well, now he's not going to visit. Maybe we should look into edge a little bit more. They have a really close relationship with Jeff Moore, too, at Tabor Academy, the head coach there. And I think through discussions with everybody, Penn State is opening up the idea of him being an edge more. But Penn State's also a very open and honest staff. They're not going to say, hey, you have the opportunity to come in here and play edge. But, long term, I think they made it pretty clear that they think he's going to grow inside. I mean, 6'5", 250.
Big. He's so big.
Yeah, he's a big dude. So let's see. I mean, Penn State got back on the board for an official visit, which is important because it looked like the other day that wasn't going to happen. I think he still has North Carolina and Boston College to go. Like when you look at the schools, it's UCLA, Arizona State, Rutgers, Michigan State, Virginia, North Carolina, Boston College. Like those are all schools that Penn State should be able to beat out. Yeah. It's just how does Penn State say, all right, 100%, we're giving you a shot at edge. You got it. Does Carter kind of come up here this weekend and they can kind of point to different things on film of saying, hey, this is why we think your potential is better at, position X, position Y, whatever it may be. That's what's going to be interesting because on the surface, this looks like a winnable recruitment for Penn State, one that makes a lot of sense too. But just it's been, excuse me, I bought my mic. So it's just been a rockier road to get there than I thought, it would be a couple months ago.
Just watching, and I apologize, there's some of these knee-jerk reactions, so, I don't hot take adjacent, let's say, but just going off these context clues, you say he's 6'5", that frame, he would immediately, for me, jump near the top of their defensive tackle board. I think he would be in a top 3, just off the top of my head. That feels like you could steal a really good defensive tackle recruit if he were to be on board with that. And a guy that has like incredible potential at that position. And if he wants to be an edge rusher, I mean, that feels more like the Branch kid from Oregon last year. I don't just looking at his size and the way his body is built, I guess he could be denied Dennis Sutton. Like if he really worked hard or if he wanted to stay in that, he doesn't look like a guy like Ivan Kamaju who had that size that didn't, get bigger. His mass looks different. Looks like a defensive tackle. So, I mean, the option is there for him if he wants. I just think that would be a big pull for Penn State if they could convince him of that particular idea.
Last two, I mean, I'll hit on Brian Bonner real quick. Like very, very good relationship with Stan Drayton. He came out here in the spring and really seemed to connect well with Drayton. Of course, this was previously more so a Joey O'Brien commitment. Although I'll actually say like this is a recruiting staff has done a really good job here. I believe Kenny Sanders I think it's Kenny Sanders more so than anybody else has been kind of on Brian Bonner for a long time to keep that interest strong. Penn State doesn't need another running back, but man, he's a really good player.
He's a really good one.
They got their foot in the door with Cali guys. Can they keep it going and get another this year? I'm not exactly sure. This is another guy who's just been really quiet too. Again, look at his offer or look at his visit list: Washington, UCLA, Nebraska. Penn State's certainly a more prominent program than all 4 or all 3 of them. But, it's when they're out in Cali and they're very quiet, it's hard for me to get excited or give Penn State fans a reason to be like, absolutely, I think he's going to end up here. But guess what? It was the exact same thing for Darius Dixon last year where at least Brian Bonner visited once where Darius Dixon just took his official visit and boom, committed right on the spot. And Darius never really wanted to talk about his recruitment leading up to that. So that's where I'm like, hey, look, Penn State has a foot in the door here and they have a very strong relationship and I don't want to overlook it. And they will take him. Don't get me wrong. He is an explosive athlete and they like, they want to get some of that in their room. But again, it's just I can't sit here with good faith and be like, I have a very good read on this one because
do you have a read on Stan Drayton, the recruiter, as of yet?
We'll figure that out next year. That next year. And it's funny you say that because I'm writing a feature story on Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen for our magazine. I was actually working on this yesterday, and I was just kind of going back at. He didn't have anything to do with their recruitment, but just the fact that I'm spending all this time doing a 1,600-word feature story, it made me really dig into Stan Drayton. So this was stuff I actually was looking into yesterday. I mean, I do think he's certainly going to be a prominent recruiter. It's just kind of what is he looking for yet? I don't exactly know. And then I think 2027, 2028, those classes will help us figure that out.
Okay, because I mean, he's a guy that the track record of the guys he's recruited that have been top 5 picks in the NFL,
for sure.
Guys he's coaching this year. For a guy that's the 54th overall player, put it up here for instead of the highlights. 54th overall player, number 4 running back in this class, according to On3. Consensus 4-star, 93 overall recruit. Those two things in my mind line up. That feels like something Stan Drayton would be able to walk in with his bona fides and then have immediate cachet with a player like that. But of course, relationships are much more than that. So I found that interesting, and I wanted to ask about that.
Yeah, I mean, Zeke and Bijan Robinson are his best two examples. I think most fans know. Both were absolutely prominent top 100 recruits, so he can get the job done. But time that's a discussion for another day. Yeah. I do want to mention Braden Fogel too quick. Yes. This was an offer that Penn State handed out just like 3 weeks ago. So a player that I've spent kind of a little more time on, especially the last 3, 4, 5 days, learning a lot more about. Basically, from what I understand, Ty Howe was at his school, I think, a day or two before that offer went out. And was just able to test him, right? And this is the benefit of the contact period now, where sure they used to be able to go out for the evaluation period and be able to watch guys do things in that, but now it's a whole different level what they're able to do, what they're able to test for, and the communication that you can have with not just the player but the family. Really good family, really good player. Like there's a lot of things here that line up. There's some Theo Johnson in him that reminds me of him and his recruitment a little bit, but I don't want to get too. I've only been really narrowing down on him for a couple of days now, so I don't want to get too ahead of myself there. But that's kind of the first thing that pops off when I get to know just family, personality, things that they care about, and of course on the field too. But we'll see where this one goes. Luke Sorensen was supposed to come this weekend. He's out. Max Sutter did not come last weekend, so it's really down. Feels like to me, Braden Fogel, Peace Peterson, who comes next weekend, the Minnesota kind of do-it-all athlete. He's a really impressive player. So let's see where this one falls. He just went to LSU and Georgia. What's more important, going down in the South and playing to him or staying closer to home. He's going to figure that all out this week. But certainly a player that Penn State feels really good about. I still kind of lean a little bit more towards Pierce Peterson being the more realistic one at the moment. But, talk to me Sunday, maybe a different story.
Interesting. Ripple effects, maybe positive and negative. Obviously, it's a positive to have 3 really high-level tight ends. If this cycle maybe wasn't as good, or if they didn't, the cause and effect of all those things, how they interact.
There's talent. It's just, look, when you add 3, look at the room. I understand. I understand why guys like, LSU's not that bad either. They can develop guys. I get it. So it's an absolutely stacked room right now. And, everybody talks about wanting to find, don't want to be in want competition, all those things. Look, there's also some really awesome prominent schools that'll pay you just as much. You have an also amazing experience. And, oh, by the way, they need help a little sooner than probably what Penn State will. So I get it.
Sure. All right. Well, Ryan, you killed it as always. Appreciate you here on the show. We'll be back on Tuesday. Of course, we'll be back when news breaks, if there's any commitments from this particular weekend, or if there's anything that happens that you need to know at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. That's the number one place to go. You can follow us on social media this weekend as well for updates and a couple highlights from 7-on-7, which is happening tomorrow. So you can follow us there, and you check us out at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. For Ryan Snyder, I'm Thomas Frank Carr. Talk to you next week on the BWI Live Show.